This is a catastrophe of epic proportion. In my opinion, the worst storm to ever hit the United States.
On August 29th, 2005, Hurricane Katrina made landfall in the Gulf Coast, forever changing the region and the country. Before Katrina developed into a hurricane, Margaret Orr, a Louisiana native and chief meteorologist at WDSU, began tracking the storm from her desk at the New Orleans station.
Tuesday, August 23rd, that's when it became a depression. 10 a.m. Wednesday, it became the 11th storm of the season. It was forecast to make landfall as a hurricane in South Florida, but that did not happen. It became a hurricane about 2 hours before landfall. It slowed down, moved into the Gulf of Mexico, where it quickly intensified. And a lot of the circulation was over that warm water, so it never died down. The lowest it got to was about 70 miles per hour. And then when it hit the warm water, it intensified.
Travers Mackel, an Emmy-award-winning investigative reporter at WDSU, was reporting from the field.
When it started making landfall at the Mississippi Gulf Coast, you knew it was bad. It had kind of skirted Plaquemines Parish on its way up. It made landfall. And this is before Twitter. This is before the dawn of Facebook. So you basically got all your reports from the television or through the radio. And we had heard some reports that it was really bad along the Mississippi Gulf Coast, devastating.
It missed the steering currents. And so high pressure built in and it steered it right our way. And then Friday afternoon, all of the models shifted it our way. Saturday morning, Katrina was a Cat 3 with winds of 115 miles per hour. 10 o'clock Saturday, a hurricane watch was issued for us.
Sunday morning, August 28th, an ominous statement was issued to the city of New Orleans from the meteorologist in charge at the National Weather Service Forecast Office in Slidell, Louisiana.
Hurricane Katrina, a most powerful hurricane with unprecedented strength, rivaling the intensity of Hurricane Camille. Most of the area will be uninhabitable for weeks, perhaps longer. At least one half of the well-constructed homes will have roof and wall failure. Sunday morning, that eye was looking right at us. I was on the air and said, oh my God, it's a Cat 5.
All right, Margaret, what can you tell us?
It's a Category 5. Katrina is now a Category 5 hurricane with winds of 160 miles per hour. Let's go to our satellite.
That night, Katrina diminished in intensity to a Cat 3, but it was huge.
Just 20 hours before Katrina made landfall, Ray Nagin, the mayor of New Orleans, issued a mandatory evacuation of the city.
He called for a mandatory evacuation after it was too late. It was too late to get people out.
The storm surge would breach 53 levees around the metro New Orleans area, but the initial thoughts on everyone's mind were that New Orleans would weather the storm.
I think people were nervous, but I think most people were like, whew, New Orleans dodged a bullet. Some windows got blown out in downtown New Orleans and there was a little bit of damage, but I think most people felt like they had dodged a bullet. There was a big sense of relief, albeit very short. We heard reports of heavy water and flooding. And it's like, wow, that's odd. The storm already passed over. Why is it flooding? And it's because you had some major levee failures across the city of New Orleans and in this metro area.
I could see that the water was actually coming through the levee. So I said, oh, Captain, I think the levee broke.
People who were high and dry, that water started rising like a foot an hour if they were far away. And if they were by the area that the wall broke, those homes were washed away. There was nothing left for several blocks. And people stayed in some situations because they survived Camille and they thought that they could survive Katrina.
We actually thought it was just a normal flood and the waters would go down, but we come outside and we don't see any of our vehicles, and people from the floors under us started to come upstairs looking for refuge. That's when we realized it was serious.
As we went back in the house to grab the keys and our shoes, it's like the water was coming in the house like rapidly, just like to where we couldn't do nothing but get to an attic.
You can't wrap your brain around this. You can't unless you're in it. I took my first boat ride last night. I've never seen so much devastation. I've been a medic for 24 years.
There were 3 major levee failures: 17th Street Canal, London Avenue Canal, Industrial Canal, that flooded various parts of New Orleans and surrounding parishes. This was not a natural disaster. This was a man-made levee failure that led to the flooding of the city of New Orleans and parts of southeast Louisiana. We're talking 10, 12, 15 feet of floodwater, where all you saw when you looked out from an elevated interstate was the tops of houses that the water was 10 and 12 feet up in the air. So it was one of those things where you can't make this up what you're looking at, but this is reality. The floodwater is really that high. Nobody expects Levees in a major American city to fare like that. We look back and you see these basket rescues with the Coast Guard of people on their rooftops. They had no place else to go. It was either go to your roof or drown. And a lot of people, unfortunately, more than 1,000 people died.
The images of children on rooftops begging to be rescued, of elderly people in wheelchairs dying, the lack of water and the extreme heat and no shade available, and people dying, just waiting to be helped.
No, let go of that. Put your arms on that life preserver.
On one of the rescues of a home in Gentilly of a little girl who was in her attic with her parents, the cops rescued them on a boat because they had to pull up to the window in a boat. The little girl couldn't swim. She was hanging. The cops told her to fall.
How deep is that water right there? You don't put it on. Just hold it on your chin. Like this. Like this. Yeah, hold it like that.
We interviewed her on the boat.
What was going through your mind here?
I just thought I was going to die. Because the water came in so fast, so I thought I was going to die.
And then once these poor people get back to the interstate, where do they go? Who picks them up? Do they start walking to one of these makeshift shelters of last resort, which was the Superdome and Convention Center? Most people thought, okay, I'm going to get my stuff. I'm going to go to the Superdome. I'm going to spend the night, and I'm going to go home. Most people didn't bring anything but the clothes on their back. Nobody expected to have to hunker down there for 3 or 4 days. That's not what they were designed for. They didn't have water there. They didn't have food in the Superdome.
No food, no water. I mean, a bare necessity.
That was part of the failure in planning, and part of the catastrophe, if you will, was a lack of preparation. FEMA became a 4-letter curse word. The federal response was not good. They couldn't get water to people. They couldn't get food to people. They couldn't get people out. And part of that dealt with the failure to pre-plan for an event like this. Natural disasters like this, it brings out the best and it brings out the worst. Normal, average citizens lost everything, and their kids were uprooted, and their jobs were lost or uprooted.
Katrina took the only family I really had. I'm the only child, just me and my mama.
And I had just, put everything into the house just before Katrina and lost everything, So it was just devastating to come back and see I don't have no house anymore.
A lot of the homes were built by families, and then they just handed them down without always doing all the paperwork. So that when Katrina hit, the person who owned the house didn't have the paperwork to prove that they owned it, and that made it harder for them to apply to programs that might have helped them rebuild.
There was a lot of looting. It was sad. People were panicked. They didn't know how to get out. That leads to essentially a point of chaos.
But local leaders were determined to step up, from Coast Guardsmen.
When we first got on the scene and saw the people, it was like, man, these people are still here. This is a lot of people. We were sticking them 15 to 20 people deep in the back of the helicopter. This is the biggest rescue operation in U.S. history.
To police officers not waiting for orders to save lives.
We don't consider ourselves heroes because any policeman that had a boat would have did the same thing.
To medical personnel acting fast to save their patients.
They have all their trust into us, so we have to do what's best for them and keep them safe.
I told her, thank you for saving my life, and I really appreciate it.
How she had him, embracing him like he was her own baby. It just did something to me. It was very emotional to see that.
And when the Navy did arrive on August 31st, they sent 3-star General Russell Honore, who organized evacuations, got people necessities, and cleaned up the city.
There were a lot of success stories, and a lot of people showed what they were made of, and it made them stronger.
Nearly 3 years after being rescued from her Gentilly home, Courtney Jackson graduated from Xavier University.
And now she's a practicing dentist, and it's a success story if there ever was one. Somebody who was literally left on the interstate with nothing but the wet clothing on her back, barefoot, with her family.
If I can get through Katrina, I got through dental school. I can get through pretty much anything. So yeah, that was a dental school was a cakewalk compared to Katrina. I couldn't let Katrina or anything else deter me from my dreams.
It's kind of woven into the fabric of all of us, and that's probably the most heartbreaking part. 15 years later, the scars still show from Katrina. When you hear somebody say 15 years later, man, I used to live in New Orleans, but I live in California now because I couldn't come back after Katrina. It kind of breaks your heart a little bit. Some areas have come back better. Some areas never came back. And I think that it was a learning experience for all of us, one that we probably never hope we have to ever deal with. Again, my mother lost a house. My childhood home got flooded in Hurricane Katrina. I mean, it was heartbreaking to see and to watch. So you realize what's important. Couches, cars, furniture, even homes. It's important, but it's not as important as your loved ones.
This could happen again. We had Betsy, we had Camille, we had Katrina. There are going to be more bad hurricanes. And truly the best advice is get out of town. Leave this area.
It's surreal to talk about 15 years later because I hope we'll never see anything like that ever again. New Orleans is way better prepared. So is every state, and so are most American cities because they learned from Hurricane Katrina.
More than 1,245 people died from the effects of Hurricane Katrina, according to estimates. The exact number is still unknown. The storm is responsible for an estimated $125 billion worth of damage, making it the costliest storm on record, slightly more than Hurricane Harvey. Were you or your loved ones affected by Hurricane Katrina? Did you help with relief efforts? Share your stories in the comments below. I'm Aaron Burrell. Thanks for watching. Please like this video and subscribe to our channel, Stitch, for new episodes of Dispatches from the Middle.